Well, hello there. It seems like everybody is jumping on the vlogging bandwagon, so I guess I'll have to as well. The only thing that I thought would be of interest would be a Doric poem. Now, coming from Peterhead, the Blue Toon, we have our own bard. That was Peter Buchan, who was our fisher poet. This is his book, which I got in 1991 as a Christmas present. And it's just fantastic. It's full of poems and short stories, all written, not all in Doric, but some of them in Doric and some of them in Peter's particular English. Because after being a fisherman, he actually ended up being a teacher in the days where you could actually be a non-certificated teacher. And he went round the schools in the Shire teaching them Doric and his poems. So here we go. I'm going to read you some of his now, which are my favourites. And this will be my first. Doric, a vlog. Let's go. So, all my markers have fallen out of the book. Oh, here we go. Brotherly Love. This was a very, very famous poem of Peter's that we learnt in school. Brotherly love. Ye ken the kind of some folk, they like to get their place, content with very little, if their neeper man has less. And though they had a fortune, it would hurt them half a sair to think some o' their body might hae just a little mair. Ye ken the kind of some folk, you'll meet them ilka day, every thocht's clean conter to fit ye hear them say. Their words are sweet as honey, but their hearts are black as coal. To see their neeper getting on, well, that's mair than they can thole. Ye ken the kind of some folk, they like to claim the sea. Their share o' loving kindness wouldna fill a budgie's ee. The love o' God constraineth them to work wi' craft and guile, to chase their neeper aff the sea and pit him in the jail. We canna a' be perfect, I'm ne'er agreed mysel', but I'll nick has for some folk a special place in hell. And says, as on their fiery he piles another log, the mair I see of some folk, the better I like my dog. So, that's brotherly love, particularly to do with fisher folk. Oh yes, Hame Comfort. This was another one that we learnt in school in Peterhead Academy in third year, I believe. And we had a great time with this one. I certainly loved it. It's called Hame Comfort, and it's all about I suppose it was a Victorian tradition of the best room. Certainly in the big Victorian houses you see in the likes of, West Road in Peterhead, more grander in Queen's Road in Aberdeen, but the fabulous Victorian houses, and the front room, the lounge, was always kept separate and kept beautiful, and you weren't allowed in there basically. And even in the little fisher villages, in the button ben houses that they had, the butt was supposed to be the nicer part of the two. And they would have wooden floors, the ceiling would be blocked in rather than the ben part of the house where the fishing lines would be hanging from the rafters and things like that. And that's where the ladies' china cabinet would be, and maybe a nice upholstered armchair, and usually in either tapestry or embroidery, Bible verses or pictures, and there were particular Victorian pictures you got of angels, very Victorian grand female angels with fabulous wings and Victorian gowns, looking after two little children standing on a cliff, stuff like that. That kind of thing. So the butt was, strangely enough, the best part of the house, the best room. But this particular story sounds much more like one of those Victorian houses. So here we go. Hame Comfort. A wife that I ken has a bonny room, wi' a fleer like polished glace, and the sun peeping in through the spotless screens gets blent with breeze o' press. There's this and there's that of the latest style, and the dearest of fancy sweets. And could you but tramp in the basses there, I'm sure you would sink to the queets. There's never a mark of stew in the place. It's our we'll cleaned and dicht it. And the grate, as farn it would heat a kirk, if the fire was ever lifted. Her man has a seat that's as hard as steam in the Barfoot kitchen end. He kens there's a far better cheer in the room, but he kens he darna gan ben. So he sits in the draught wi' a dreep at his nose and a hacket hoast at his breast. And he growls as he glowers at the skimpit fire, who's a fitted carpet neist. But he shouldna garn, for he ought to ken, if he'd ony sense in his head, that he'll get a chance of the room some day, fin he's Carl and Steph, indeed. And indeed, the coffin was usually laid out in the best room too. Now, there's a couple of wordies you maybe wouldn't recognise. Queets. Queets are your ankles, and basses, of course, are rugs or short little carpets. So I think it's got some French connection as well. To dicht, of course, is to wipe. So dichtet means wiped. A swarn. A swarn's an odd word. It's really quite old-fashioned. It just means, well, in the context here, and the great, a swarn, it would heat a kirk if the fire was ever lifted. It's something like, let's see what Peter said. He reckons it means. At the back of this book, there's a fantastic glossary, so that always helps. A swarn, I reckon. So it's like, well, I suppose, he's sort of saying that it would heat a kirk because it's this apparently great big fire that has maybe a marble mantelpiece, and the lady of the house obviously never let it be used. Barefoot, kitchen end, barefoot sounds like the English barefoot. A draught and a dreep is nose, well, a draught. A hack and host, that's a cough, a really bad chest. So the man in the story is obviously suffering from sitting in the cold back kitchen. But the poet's obviously suggesting, well, it'll soon be that he shuffles off his mortal coil and he will get benefit of the room, but not when he's still alive. Anyway, that's it for tonight. I think that's plenty. So, more Peter Buchan and maybe more Doric nonsense another time. Good night, all.